Good evening, this is Goldy, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. Excuse me. Also, I'm a flip-flopper in the way that I want my doctor, my lawyer, my therapist, my politician, my friends, and my family to be. When you have new information, you change your theories. It's Friday, December 26, 2014. I'm in a secure location. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. If you want an inaccurate transcript of this show, send me an email to goldyrant@gmail.com. Generally speaking, the rants stay up on Ustream for 30 days. The last one is at the link that came in the email. The July 11th, 2012 rant, The Right Answers, is on YouTube. That link is on that email as well. I need to do a quick correction from last week. Rick Perry was the governor from 2003 to 2005 when the racial profiling laws took effect, requiring the Department of Public Safety to record the race of the person pulled over, which of course led to the ability to see the disproportionate numbers of people of color being pulled over. Also, thanks to little Sean, who showed me that having a VIP box at the Toros would potentially be uncivilized racism. For him, anyway, under my definition of last week. Torture, torture, torture. I've been formulating a response since the release of the 6,000-page torture report detailing CIA torture at black sites around the world post 9/11. I look back at my prior rants and realize that I've placed torture in the following categories: assassinations, surveillance, undeclared wars, and bin Laden. I believe that proponents think that there was some turning point at 9/11. It's incorrect, but let's go through some of the key questions for discussion. Number one, what is torture? And does torture work? Number two, can George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and the other responsible parties rely on first-year attorney John Hughes' memorandum saying it was okay, or should he be tried as a war criminal? Should they be tried, really? Number three, what are you trying to protect with torture? Freedom? A just, open society? A sub-argument is, what about the innocent people who we torture? Only once you have answered those questions can you begin to have a discussion. Otherwise, this devolves into, all those Muslims want to kill us, so we need to torture them. Innocent or not, illegal or not, immoral or not, to find the next ticking time bomb. Remember, we're not talking about using normal policing and investigating arms of the government, finding criminals or bringing them to justice, prison, or in some cases, death. These are people we caught on the battlefield. If they are not criminals, then they are soldiers entitled to prisoner of war status. Detainee, person of interest, enemy combatant, all bullshit words to make it easier to do what you want with these people. I do not believe that there has been war declared in any circumstance since World War II. And Congress' relinquishment of its responsibilities to declare war under the Constitution has made a mockery of the War Powers Act. Congress has the right to declare war. The president does not. Presidents act at the whim of donors to do whatever they want. Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala. I think you get my point. So since we have an endless war on terror, maybe the best we can hope for is criminal status. You are not allowed to torture a criminal, citizen or not. Back to the question of what is torture. The Geneva Convention has a definition of torture. The United States in its federal statutes has a definition of torture. The United Nations has a torture commission, and various other countries have definitions of torture. I'm going to blow off their definitions for the sake of argument. And believe me, they strain their definitions to allow whatever they want to do. And I'm going to explore for a moment. I'm going to read a list very slowly, and I want you to imagine that the items discussed below are or have been done to you, and you are at risk of them occurring again, thanks to indefinite detention at places like Guantanamo Bay, or even worse, places that we do not even know about, foreign countries. Black sites is what they're called. Okay, so feel it. You've been hooded. They put a black hood over your head and chained, placed aboard a jet in the dark. It's difficult to breathe. You're not able to go to the bathroom. You're forced to defecate on yourself. Just sit back and feel it for a moment. Oh, you can't sit back. You're forced upright. The movies Brazil, 1984, and Conspiracy Theory can give you a pretty good taste of the initial restraints and the fear that's created. Let's go over each item slowly. Waterboarding. It's a neat little trick where they put cloth over your head and invert you. Your head is lower than your feet and start pouring water. It simulates drowning. Now, that's the definition. They say it simulates drowning. You are actually drowning. You could be drowned by getting enough water in there and being unable to breathe. Being kept awake for over 60 hours and or being kept in a cold cell naked for over 60 hours. Do you know what it's like to try and stay awake in a bad lecture? Can you imagine that they're zapping you each time to keep you awake for 60 hours? The body is required to go to sleep. The mind must go to sleep. Fake killing. So they cock a gun, put it to your head, and go click, or cock a gun, put it to your head, put a blank in it, boom. Loud music and noise. I think they used some Britney Spears and some Metallica. Very, very loud. Messes with the brain. Light and air deprivation. So you'll be put in a darkened cell. Hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Days and days and days and days. Beating. Burning. Cigarettes. Hanging in an uncomfortable position by a limb or limbs for days. Just think about that. You're being held up there, you have a bad shoulder. You think it will never get better. Attacked by dogs. Remember the Abu Ghraib? Humiliated, raped, sodomized. Now let's put ourselves in the position of the person who's having one of the above items done to them. Feel it. Waterboard. Awake, cold, fake killing, loud music, air, light deprivation, beating, burning, hanging in uncomfortable positions, attacked by dogs, humiliated, raped, and sodomized. Feel it. It's called empathy. Most people don't do it. They say this word. Okay? So those items are what have happened to people in the name of the U.S. Now, I think all of us humans, at least the humans that I come in contact with, or know, which is all of them, that any one of the above items would be considered torture. Not legally, just the word as they know it. We humans don't seem to care whether it's legal or illegal when it's being done to us. We don't care that there's a strained definition and that this may be legal under some manufactured statute. I think we certainly feel that any one of those items is uncivilized, as I used in last week's racism rant. Now, like I said earlier, it appears that the proponents of torture think there was a turning point at 9/11. I believe that they and Fox News and the military corporate donors under Citizens United are incorrect. But let's at least deal with some realities. Since post 9/11, we are generally talking about brown people who may or may not also be Muslim from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Somalia, Russia, and on and on and on. I have to ask, does anyone in any of these countries, anyone who has family in any one of these countries, care about our strained definition of torture and whether it was torture that we did to their sons, their fathers, their husbands, their brothers, their sisters? Because it's the main point of the argument. We shouldn't release a torture report because, we're going to create all these enemies. The enemies are there. When things come out like this, you make enemies of the people of your own country. You make enemies of those people that care about this country. When I took criminal law in law school, it turned out that there may be different reasons for a criminal statute, among them deterrence of a future crime, punitive, meaning punishment, and rehabilitation. Those are some of the three. Some have worked over our history and some have not. Current ongoing debate on capital punishment is interesting in that it does not appear to deter any crimes and is more expensive. But that's besides the point. Those are three of the types of things that you would have a reason for a statute, a criminal statute. I don't see any of those things in torture. For torture, as we've defined it, the CIA and its contractors, think donors to politicians under Citizens United, and let's say that this is unethically, the CIA doctors, they were making sure, well, what the fuck were they making sure did or did not happen? And our armed forces were attempting to extract information on the next ticking time bomb. It's that old story. Next ticking time bomb. So that's what they were doing. We have a ticking time bomb. We got to get it from this guy. 3 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, 6 years later, 7 years later, 8 years later, 9 years later, 10 years later, 11 years later, 12 years later, 13 years later. Some of these people are still in detention and potentially being tortured. It's the old Jack Bauer 24 argument. I've counted in various places that there's always a ticking time bomb. There's always information that an accused criminal has in his brain. And I'm using that term because criminal is the only definition that actually works. Israel has stopped using torture as it does not work. If you watch Russell Brand's True News on this topic, you'll see a Fox News interview with an official from Ronald Reagan's administration. She states that the report says that torture does not work. And this is 20 years before 9/11. They knew it 20 years ago it doesn't work. If you watch more of the reporting, actually, it's now out of the news cycle. This torture report only lasted 5 days. You will not hear one word from proponents that torture does not work. You will only hear the red herring that this will make people angry with us around the world. It'll make our allies angry with us that we release this report that we torture people. But this is a critical item. If it doesn't work, why would you use it? People always find out what you're doing in secret. Governments can't keep secrets. That's 10 times worse. I don't actually know why. Except Citizens United and their subcontractors that are getting paid some of our commons money. Okay, as to 3 of the questions, what is torture? Does torture work? Should the responsible parties be held to war crimes? There were 2 views published in the Austin American Statesman on December 22nd, 2014. The proponent of torture is Lawrence J. Haas, and the opponent is John P. Quigley. I'm going to reprint it in full, but I'll only read sections. CIA, so this is the pro-torture. We like torture. CIA report encourages terrorists, scares off allies. Though they preside over the world's most important nation, our leaders in Washington can be startlingly oblivious to the audiences beyond our shores that watch and listen closely to whatever we say or do. That's the only rational explanation for why, 13 years after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, Senate Intelligence Committee Democrats issued a graphic self-flagellating report about the CIA's enhanced interrogation methods in the frightening days, weeks, and months after that fateful day. With its provocative detail splashed across the TV screens, front pages, and websites of our leading media, the report will undoubtedly endanger American lives by giving terrorists one more rallying cry to attack U.S. interests, strengthening terrorist recruiting efforts, and forcing other governments and intelligence services to show that they're keeping their distance from Uncle Sam. To be clear, the report was revealing only in its raw detail of CIA activities against particular detainees, not in the broad subject matter. We've known for many years that the CIA used unsavory methods. Now this guy, remember my list? He says unsavory methods. That's like saying your hands were dirty when you prepared the food. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about food preparation. We're talking about torture. Back to the article. In fact, when news surfaced years ago that the CIA deprived suspects of sleep, chained them to walls, threatened them with gruesome death, and so on, government officials, opinion leaders, and the broad public began a serious and cathartic national debate over whether the United States should ever torture. I remember this broad national cathartic debate. No, that didn't happen. Despite the outliers, we even reached a general consensus that we should avoid anything that smacks of torture and consider employing it only in the most extreme cases, such as when the United States faces the imminent threat of a catastrophic attack that could kill hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Despite the outliers, so they're talking about me, I guess, we even reached a general consensus. We, the 95% of the fucking idiots that are in this country, that say I'm innocent, you can search me. Those are the same idiots. They totally understand constitutional law. They've discussed it with their friends. Anything that smacks of torture and consider employing it only in the most extreme cases, such as when the United States faces the imminent threat of a catastrophic attack that could kill hundreds, if not thousands of people. That's always occurring. That's occurring right now. At least that's what we've been told. So just listen to the use of words. We've reached a consensus only... No, we haven't. Now listen to this bullshit. And again, I print this here, and that's my opinion, that's bullshit. America debated torture and rendered its judgment long ago. Rather than advance that debate, the committee's report is just making American deaths more likely. What are you talking about? This guy, okay, so his name is Haas. He was a former communications director for Vice President Al Gore. And he's a senior fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council. What the fuck? We have not decided. We have not rendered our opinions. All the information's withheld. It's withheld. We don't have any information. And when we get the information, they say torture doesn't work in their own report. And so a bunch of Americans say, yeah, go ahead and use torture if it's going to save us from... What? Next article is against torture. Senate panel reignites torture debate. CIA torture practices are not news to terrorists. This is by John B. Quigley. The Senate Intelligence Committee's release of its report on CIA torture is a welcome step towards transparency. The methods used to wage the war on terror are of more than a little public interest. Despite gruesome details included in the report about what was done to detainees, the release is not likely to lead to any immediate increased risk to Americans, is his opinion. It has been no secret for some time now that the CIA used techniques amounting to torture in its post-9/11 interrogations. What has augmented the ranks of those inclined to cause harm to Americans is the torture itself, not its description in the Senate report. I agree. The interrogation methods had already been called torture by other authoritative bodies. Last summer, the European Court of Human Rights ordered Poland to pay money damages to Abu Zubaydah, who was tortured in Poland at a black site made available to the CIA by the Polish government. The court found that the methods used against Abu Zubaydah constituted torture as internationally defined. The court found Poland complicit in torture perpetrated by the CIA. The European Court is no rogue outfit. Its judges are drawn from countries that are our closest allies. It was in fact the capture of Abu Zubaydah in March 2002 in Pakistan that prompted the CIA to opt for harsh tactics in interrogation. In the case of Abu Zubaydah, the Senate report says harsh tactics including waterboarding, did not result in any significant information from him. Let me repeat that. The Senate report says harsh tactics including waterboarding did not result in any significant information from him. The United States has also been pilloried for the post-9/11 interrogations by the UN Committee Against Torture, which monitors the torture convention we signed hypocritically. To a great extent, what the Senate Intelligence Committee reported confirmed, albeit in greater detail, what outside monitors have already found. The aspects of the Senate report that trouble Americans, whether the CIA lied to Congress and whether the torture produced actionable intelligence, are of less moment abroad. What matters in world public opinion is what we did. Like I said before, doesn't matter what the definition of torture is. You pull out somebody's fingernails, their family's going to be upset. The torture was part of an oversized reaction to 9/11 that included an ill-conceived invasion of Afghanistan. Instead of dealing with the Afghanistan government to gain custody of those responsible for the attacks in New York, like you would if you were a cop, we took over the country. Now we're trying to extricate ourselves from Afghanistan, but without correcting the instability that let al-Qaeda operate. It's all these actions taken together that make us an attractive target for a new generation of terrorists. Not surprisingly, our actions are interpreted as arrogance and as a reflection of an attitude of superiority. Our continuing stance in the dispute over historic Palestine does not help in convincing those who would harm us that we've changed our ways. Bin Laden was upset over that. Even today, we stand practically alone in refusing to acknowledge Palestine as a nation state and in protecting Israel in the UN Security Council. It made sense to come clean on torture, in part because torture is a crime under U.S. law. A federal statute incorporates the UN Convention Against Torture, making torture committed anywhere in the world a crime. Charles Taylor, son of the former Liberian president of the same name, serving a 97-year sentence in federal prison for orchestrating torture in Liberia when he headed a government anti-terrorism unit under his father. Also, many Japanese were hanged for waterboarding during World War II. Our troops. But war crimes are for the losers, as a friend said on Facebook. Back to the thing. Regardless of whether any U.S. official is prosecuted, the Senate in its oversight role had to release this report about torture. In the long term, the safety of America will depend on how we deal with foreign policy issues overall, not just this one. Quigley is a distinguished professor of law at Ohio State University. So there's a couple of things in there that support what I say. There's some things in there that kind of support proponents of torture, I guess. But question number 2, should George W. Bush and Dick Cheney be tried? Did they commit war crimes? If we had lost, they did. Sure sounds like they did. And them stupidly listening to an idiot John Yoo memorandum, drafted like a first-year lawyer, appears to be one of the situations where the lawyer was told the conclusion that was wanted by the client. Like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Those people were told to say that it was there. Should they be prosecuted for war crimes? Seems like they did it. They're not protected because a lawyer gave you an opinion. You sign a contract and get a legal opinion from the lawyer. You sue the lawyer. It doesn't mean you don't go to jail. Now, obviously, the big question is, what are we trying to protect by torturing? Because if it does work, it might. Doesn't appear to. Let's say it does. I mean, are you so concerned with your way of life that you need to put up a picture of someone jumping out of the Twin Towers on fire to talk about the torture report? That's what proponents are doing. Why would you do that? I mean, why do you start at 9/11? There are a few little items that occurred before that date. I ask you to read of the torture, abuses, and deaths by the Shah of Iran at the behest and assistance of the CIA, following the CIA organized coup in the 50s. the abuses throughout Latin America, the disappeared, and current Guatemalan and Honduran killing and torture at the behest of the U.S. and our contractors who donate under Citizens United. And there it is again, Citizens United. When somebody can make money off of governmental action, they will. Hypothetically, even if torture did work, we would need to weigh the correct ticking time bomb information that's gathered by torture. We would have to weigh that against the innocent babies who were killed with false information supplied by those who were being tortured in order to get the torture to stop, and the innocent individuals who were taken into custody following false confessions by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. See the torture report. And who were then tortured for years at CIA black prisons. And also, please see Germany's recent call for war crime prosecutions. One of those was a German citizen, innocent. Aren't we creating more terrorists by our bad behavior? I mean, legitimately. Now let's look back at that list and imagine we are innocent and have no information to give. Waterboarding, being kept awake for over 60 hours and or being kept in a cold cell naked for over 60 hours. Fake killing, loud music and noise, light and air deprivation, beating, burning, hanging in uncomfortable positions by a limb or limbs for over 60 hours, attacked by dogs, humiliated, raped, and sodomized. Again, what are we trying to protect? Are we trying to protect our own U.S. babies? Certainly. Are we trying to protect our way of life? I have no idea what that is. You hear it. Are we trying to protect some view of freedom? They hate our freedoms. Remember that phrase in 2002? These are phrases that have no meaning. I mean, are we trying to protect some perverted version of the rule of law? They attacked us at 9/11. We're going to call that the starting point, so we're getting them back. We're allowed to torture because they tortured those people who burned in those buildings. I don't know. I don't see their point. In my many, many surveillance rants, I argue that this whole idea of trading some freedoms for security is illusory. You end up having neither freedom nor security. And it's not an original thought of mine. We certainly did not prevent Major Hassan at Fort Hood or the Boston Marathon bombing through surveillance or torture. But we gave up a huge chunk of freedom and privacy. You'll hear the argument, it's the old roadblock argument. I've got nothing to hide, so you can do it. You can search me. I've got nothing to hide, you can read my emails. There's a continuum of privacy. At one end is your body, torture. Farther along is your emails and your phone and your ability to talk. This idea that we're fearful and we need to use these things completely defeats the purpose of the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And it doesn't work. Cruel and unusual punishment is the Eighth Amendment. It's in there. We don't do it anymore, hopefully. Cops don't do it anymore, trying to get confessions. We have Miranda warnings. You can have a lawyer. But these other people, they're less than us. They're brown. They attacked us. I mean, I look back at my prior rants to find out how many I'd done. This is the fourth specific torture rant. But I've placed torture in the, like I said, assassinations, surveillance, undeclared wars, and bin Laden. Because it has occurred in all of those categories. Although the capture and death of bin Laden was done using regular police work. Good job. It wasn't. They didn't find it through torture. I don't see it. I don't care what you call it. You burn a hole in my hand, it's torture. I might be innocent. I might tell you some names and you might go kill them. It doesn't appear to work. Should George Bush and Cheney and the rest of those boys have some problems as war criminals? It was a bad time in this country. But it's the bad times that define you. It's the extreme cases that define you. As another aside, you've got to love Russell Brand. He does this torture report in an almost Jon Stewart way, and it is painful. However, one key item regarding Russell Brand, he does issue strong calls for small action by dedicated people, something that Jon Stewart does not do. It's how the racial profiling law got passed in Texas. 4 dedicated ACLU of Texas volunteers worked very hard in a Republican legislature. So, I'm happy to talk with anyone. I can tell you, though, I will know. If you watch Fox News, we know who you are. If you watch MSNBC, we know who you are. Whatever Obama does is okay, because it's our guy doing it. That was Libya. Where were the anti-war people then? Where are the anti-torture people now? We don't even know what's going on right now. Don't think, because it was reported that Dick Cheney's Office of Disinformation was shuttered in the early 2000s, that there is not such an office. Do not believe that we are not illegally surveilling, torturing, and killing citizens and non-citizens alike, innocent and not innocent alike, all in the name of freedom. You should be sickened and afraid. I am. So don't post another Twin Tower smoldering ruin when talking about this. It does nothing to enhance the discussion. Come up with numbers, show items where things were prevented. I will then argue that you have to have some certain amount of things happening to live in a truly free society. Because we don't want to be surveilling everybody. We don't want to be torturing people. We don't want to be reading every email. I don't. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content of this conversation. PianoByAngelo.com. Angelo Limbessis, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. She can make anything look like anything. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. TicoAdventureLodge.com, small hotel in Samar, Costa Rica. Arriba, La Vela Latina, 2 great restaurants in Samar. And, of course, The Delicate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. Tell me where I'm wrong, please. And thanks for coming out.